If you have a complex task or process that has to be done in a certain order, one of the best ways to make sure it gets done consistently is by using a checklist. In this video, we're going to make a guided checklist so that the computer can help remind you what step is next. Okay, let's crack open Visual Studio Code so that we can get working on this guided checklist program. So even if you're not familiar with Python or coding very much, just go ahead and follow along. I very much believe that anybody can learn programming, so don't be afraid of it. You learn best by doing, and so let's go ahead and just make this work. So what I've done here is I've opened up a new file, brand new file. I just saved it as guidedchecklist.py so that we can just have it already noting that this is a Python file. And what I've done here is this is kind of what we call boilerplate code, which is, we just want this at the beginning of all of our scripts. So we want it to have this little shebang and the Python 3, that's important just for the computer. And then here's the description of what this script is. Then after this, I have just put in some comments for what I want this script to do and kind of the steps of how I think this should be accomplished. That helps us kind of get a skeleton so that we don't have to be coding on a blank screen, because that sometimes is really intimidating and hard to work through. So let's get to it. We're going to start out by defining our steps in our process. If we're trying to get a checklist made for us, we probably have some kind of complicated task that has a bunch of steps, and we want to put those steps in order as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a variable that's going to hold all of that information, because we don't want to have to type out every step every time. Let's just make sure that the computer knows where to look for the steps in our process. So I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to call it steps because that makes a lot of sense to me. This is going to be a list. And what this line that I just typed out means is we're going to have some data. It's going to be in a certain format. A list is a type of data, and we're going to assign it to this variable called steps. That's what the equal sign means. We're going to take anything that's to the right of it and we're going to assign it to steps. And inside of this list, we can put in all kinds of data. Think of it as kind of like a CSV or a comma separated file for a spreadsheet program like Excel or Google Sheets. So if you're familiar with that, this may be something that would look sort of familiar to you. But it would basically just be a single row of information. What that means, or what that looks like, is basically something like this. So if I were to put all of our steps into this variable, I want it to have a couple of sentences. We have a sentence for the first step and for the second, so that it's very descriptive for me as the user. When I see this step, I know what to do. Step 1, step 2 is probably not very useful for me. So I'm kind of describing the task that needs to be done. And in order to do some kind of text like this, we just need to make sure that it's surrounded in quotes. It can be single quotes or double quotes. It just matters that you're consistent and that you've opened them and closed them around the text that you want to be contained within itself. And when you're ready for the next step to be entered, you put a comma, and then you can type out your next step here in another quotation container, if you will. So now that I've got all of our steps listed out here in our list, I want to be able to go through each of these and be able to do something with each one of these steps. So there's something really useful, which is the for loop, and the syntax for that is for, and then we can just give a name for the item that we want to call it. So I'm just going to call it step, because it's going to be for each step inside of our big list of steps, right? So for step singular, in steps plural, colon, and now this line is telling the computer, hey, in our variable called steps, we've got a bunch of stuff. We want to go line by line through each of these items here, and we're going to call every item a step, and that way we can refer to the step later. And so here I've got a little bit of a hint for printing out each of these instructions. I'm going to uncomment this. The print command is super useful, and you're going to probably use this in all of your scripts going forward. But this is how you can have something show up on the screen inside of your terminal when your script is running. Maybe you want it to tell you when it's done or tell you where it is in the program. It's super useful to have print statements throughout your code. So what we're going to do is let's just try this. Let's have it print out every step for us. And that should take care of a lot of things for us, actually. So let's see what happens when we run it. So what I'm going to do is open up the terminal. And then, of course, I'm going to activate my virtual environment. If you don't know what that is, go ahead and watch the video on virtual environments here in the card. We're going to activate it, and then we can just type Python and then the name of the file. I'm using tab to autofill, so I don't have to type out the full file name. And then I'm going to hit enter, and we're going to run this program and see what happens. Okay, so super fast. It printed out every single step that's inside of our steps variable, which is actually pretty cool. However, it's not the most user-friendly, because if I am trying to do some kind of maybe high stakes or stressful task that's kind of complicated, and then all the computer does is tell me a whole bunch of stuff all at once, that's not very useful. I want it to guide me through my process. I want it to tell me what's next, but not what's everything that's next. I just want my very next step. So we can make a slight modification to our file and fix that. So if we go back in here, we can comment this out one more time. I'll comment it just so that you can have it later. So down here is the alternate method of making this work for us as users. We want it to actually pause while it's giving us a step. We want it to pause until we have actually finished it, and we can then tell the computer, hey, I'm done with this step, and then it will give us the one that's after it. And this is accomplished very quickly just by using the input statement. And it's going to look really close to the print statement. The biggest difference here is that we are allowing the user to actually interact with the program as it's running by using this input statement. So the cool thing about this is input is going to pause the program entirely until the user hits enter. That's the only time it's going to decide to continue to move on through the program. Of course, there's other ways to use this, but this is the perfect way for us to step through each of these steps and not get overwhelmed. The cool thing also about input is whatever you put inside of the parentheses is going to be printed out to the screen. So in this case, we don't need to write out more instructions because we've technically already done that with our steps. And so we just want it to print out the steps, but we want it to pause and wait for us to hit enter. So now that we've done this, let's go ahead and save it, open back into the terminal here. And if I hit the up arrow, we can go back to our command here and hit enter. Hey, that's a lot better. I can open the page. Okay, so now I can go over, I open the page. Okay, check for spelling errors. That's something I can do. I'm going to go check for spelling errors. Okay, now I need to check for broken links. That's right. Okay, yeah, run these tests. Okay, add it to the sitemap. Okay, I did that. And now I need to go check it. And now I'm done. We can see that we are now back to kind of our main terminal interface, what we're kind of used to seeing. And that means the program has run and we have gone through each of these steps, and it was guided by the computer, so we didn't have to remember these steps anymore, and we can just let the computer tell us, hey, here's your next one once you've finished your last one. Now it's your turn. Update the steps with your own process and make this work for you. There's a link to the code for this project in the description. Congratulations on your first Python automation. If you like building projects like this, might I interest you in another?